What was that? Striking while the iron is hot? Better late than never to continue with Spyro, especially since I now have the excuse to do so, having just played an average to below platformer. Granted, the irony here is that I find Ripto's Rage to be my least favorite of the original Insomniac trilogy, a statement that is absolutely liable to ruffle some feathers. Or scales, to be on brand. I don't know why that is, my dislike of the middle games in a trilogy. Dark Souls 2, Digimon World 2, since it's a part of the PlayStation 1 trio, Xenosaga 2, Metro Last Light, you get the picture. To offset this, Fallout 2 and New Vegas out of Interplays and the Revivals trilogies, Arkham City, as I don't count Origins or Gotham Knights. I find Sly 2 to be a fantastic game, sometimes overtaking my favorite in that trilogy, Honor Among Thieves. And if I can recall properly, I said Max Payne 2 was an excellent experience through and through. Don't really know what to say. My brain goblins don't make sense to me, and they live rent-free up there. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder for at least $1 to get your name in the credits, additional videos like thumbnail time-lapses and the Showtime Reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't, I ain't your Uncle Irwin. I would crash through your walls, but do I look like King Kong Bundy? I ain't an egg. Nor did I main event in Heroes of Wrestling. This goes without mentioning, you'd probably want to watch Let's Talk About Spyro the Dragon before continuing onward. Both because I covered Insomniac's early years up to the release of Spyro 1, and since gameplay concepts are mostly identical, I don't feel the need to retread ground when they come up. And yes, you'll probably hear this again later on because yada yada tabs written out of order. Redundancy Department of Redundancy. So to actually get to the meat and potatoes, yeah, Spyro the Dragon was a commercial and critical success, barring a few notes regarding its lack of difficulty, with a number of reasonable factors to give. The general appeal of a collectathon platformer that both kids and adults could enjoy. The PlayStation not having a defining mascot like Mario or Sonic, which I would argue is a reason why Crash Bandicoot saw some of the momentous success it had. And obviously the marketing of SCE America's Andrew House put eyes on both the console and the Dragon during the '98 holiday season. And lest we forget, Spyro the Dragon is just a damn fun video game to play. Insomniac breaking limitation boundaries with the likes of Al Hastings' wizardry when it came to displaying a fully 3D world without breaking immersion, and Matt Whitting's masterful programming for the controls, allowing Spyro to feel smooth as silk. All this was backed up by imaginative designs heralded by Kirsten Van Schreven and the art team, Craig Stitt being the one to spitball a game idea about a dragon, Stewart Copeland's banging soundtrack, Ted Price's drive to see his company be a success story after Disruptor's lack of attention, and of course, Mark Cerny's wisdom. The proverbial Cinderella story that doesn't need expansion. Disruptor, inwardly, is Insomniac's most important title as it taught the team many a thing, but what put their name on the map was Spyro the Dragon. That's what makes Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage's story not as intricate in comparison. Just look at this time window. Spyro the Dragon was released on September 9th, 1998. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage was released on November 2nd, 1999. That is, roughly, a little over a year, as in development for the sequel began as soon as the prequel had hit store shelves. So, what do? Simple. Expand on what worked, fix what didn't. Here's an excerpt from the official US PlayStation Magazine, Volume 3, Issue 1, interview with Ted Price. After the solid response, it was an easy decision to go forward with a sequel. What took a bit more thought was the question of what, if anything, to change. After all, much of the casual gamer public enjoyed Spyro for the very reason it was criticized by the press and hardcore gamers: its simplicity. Would they end up sacrificing one for the sake of the other? At first, it may appear so. Ripto's Rage was designed specifically to offer a greater challenge for the experienced player. Says Price, "Without question, we wanted to increase the depth and variety of the gameplay, and Spyro 2 is a much bigger game than Spyro 1 in terms of the gameplay. There's just a lot more to do this time." I will say, though, that the interviewer's speculation was a tad bit off base, since nothing in Ted's statement hints that Spyro 2 was only going to be for the hardcore audience. He literally just states that the game is bigger and there's more to do. In fact, later on in the interview, Ted confirms that there are multiple levels of completion for Spyro 2, so I don't know where the concern comes from. Speaking of off base, here's a diagram on the next page over from where I got the quote. Big Guts and Laura would play with each other vibes from this. That said, the size of the team did grow to around 13. Remember, Spyro 1 was helmed by a small group, even if we are including people outside of the real hands-on stuff like Mark Cerny and Stewart Copeland, which included another Hastings brother, Peter, and I can logically assume that some development trickery was employed to ease the admittedly crunchy deadline, like reusing assets, animations, things of that nature. A bit like FromSoft find a way to port the Vanguard Demon Butt Smash into every one of their Soulsborne games. Sadly, this is where I don't have much to say about the policeman this time round. He was mostly left to his own devices post the initial Spyro title. If I may return to the game's TM interview I used for the first Spyro video, as it is retrospective on Copeland's whole tenure with Insomniac, the police drummer provides the following. Like any client, they were all over me at the beginning to get the tone right, while the first few tracks were judged by a committee and it went back and forth, leading to debates and discussions. Then, gradually they left me alone, so after the first few meetings with Insomniac Games, I saw very little of them. Granted, I wonder how much of this was Copeland having already proven his skill versus the tight 1-year deadline the production had. Can't really go back and forth when the due date is tomorrow and you only have the word "the" written in fanciful font. And, surprisingly, this joke works. Replacing Carlos Razki would be the Bob himself, Tom Kenny. Now, for why this change happened, I have conflicted and uncredited reports that Insomniac found Carlos's voice for the dragon too nasally and annoying, thus they went with Tom, but there's no source to back this up. And from the way Tom Kenny has spoken about his role as Spyro, it was just a gig to him. A gig that would give him a lot of fanfare later on in life, of which he has reflected on quite positively, but this was essentially a side project for the voice actor. An hour of work in between SpongeBob, which had just begun airing in May of '99. That said, Carlos and Kenny did have a history in video games. Yes, they were both part of '93's Rocco's Modern Life, that's why I said video games, before all this. As a part of Naughty Dog's E3 '97 showcase for Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. Carlos handled the commercials, if you remember them, but the two VAs worked the mocap booth interchangeably. It all comes back to what Ted Price said, if I may paraphrase, about the 1-year deadline in the G4TV Icon series covering Insomniac. They were under the double pressure of having a truncated development cycle and having to come up with something revolutionary as opposed to evolutionary. The first part of that sentence explains the above changes to the team, to the workflow. The second half explains why Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage decided to focus on minigames and little side quests in the levels. It would help this second outing to stand apart from the previous one, as well as introduce divergent gameplay ideas to the core formula so it wouldn't get stale. This sentiment was heavily push during the E3 '99 showcase, with SCE America's Director of Product Marketing Amy Blair providing the following to IGN. With the original Spyro the Dragon game, we found that gamers of all types enjoyed the mischievous lead character, quirky humor, and unparalleled graphics that the game offered. With Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, we brought back these favorite features, while completely enhancing the gaming experience with all new character moves, larger 3D worlds, and more challenging, varied gameplay. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage offers exciting and immersive gaming for players of all skill levels. Much like the original, Spyro 2 would be a success story, earning 1 million sales during the '99 holiday season, a few award nominations, and seeing subsequent re-releases, such as the PlayStation 3 library version and the Reignited trilogy. And I think a bundle with the other 2 Spyro games on the PlayStation 1 that I may have gotten from Target or Kmart when I was yay high to a sandhouse. And like with Spyro 1, I used the EPSXE emulator for Ripto's Rage. You want to talk about wafer thin? Yeah, Spyro 2 has you covered. There just isn't much to say about the main plot outside of Spyro's the good guy, Ripto and cohorts are the bad guys. Guess who wins at the end of the day and has his vacation at Dragon Shores? It is funny that this whole plot kicks off because of Alora, Hunter, and the Professor fiddling around with orbs and portals, leading them to accidentally summoning Ripto, so they have to pull Spyro from out of his world so that he can stop the Titan-sized tyrant. But that's about as much as you'll get here. Oh, and the undercurrent of Avalar's civil war, plus the parallels between some of the worlds Spyro visits, making for an incidentally curious set of diegetic beats. Breeze Harbor and Zephyr's war is interestingly handled if kept surface level, in that Spyro basically signs himself off mercenary style to get what he needs from the birds and blubber. This kind of toying with ideas and what scenarios that the main character would be placed in feels almost prototypical of where Insomniac went with Ratchet & Clank. Continuing further with the non-verbal storytelling, I forgot how much of Spyro 2 is interconnected. Every world has at least 2 sets of levels that are adjacent to each other in some way. Colossus and Idle Springs have these same helper NPCs, Aquarian Towers and Sunny Beach are both beset by the water workers, Skelos Badlands and Crystal Glacier exist in the same shared plane, Fracture Hills and Magma Cone clearly happen in one localized area, Zephyr and Breeze Harbor are at war, and Mystic Marsh and Cloud Temples have monks as their allied aligned characters. While it is outright said to the player what the relationship is between Zephyr and Breeze Harbor, for all the rest, it is pretty much up to interpretation when it comes to wondering how the areas are connected. Do some characters in the Colossus/Idle Springs realm decide to be friars or sculptors based on where their aptitude lies? Did the carvers help construct the temples for those at Colossus? Where is Sunny Beach in correlation to Aquaria Towers? Are the towers right below the beach, and that's why the shock stick water workers appear in both areas? How did the same tribe get split in Skelos Badlands and Crystal Glacier? Did they migrate independent of the other, like the actual cavemen from our history? Why did the Earthshapers target the satyrs and fawns of Fracture Cone? Is Alora a native of Magma Hills? Do the monks of Mystic Marsh have to toil away reaching enlightenment before they can start practicing magic in the Cloud Temples? Or are those separate divisions of the same order? These questions don't have an answer, as it's all up to theory. It makes for wonderful conjecture material for a game whose main plot is stock and in service to the gameplay. I feel like I'm kinda in a corner for these next 2 tabs, as yeah, Spyro 2 keeps to the tradition that Spyro 1 had. This is still a pretty phenomenal looking and sounding game, taking the elements of the first title and blowing them up to a bigger scale, both when idling and in motion. You can tell that this is a modified version of the same engine, and I find that to be a positive. Does it say a lot that the only bad thing on display are the skyboxes? Oh no, this gradient isn't really adding to the literal undersea utopia that had a ton of thought and care put into its design. How will I ever enjoy this fort in the middle of the desert stuffed to the brim with guards and their pack animals when I can tell that the sky is nothing but a few shades of blue? I haven't seen any of those Spyro game is cozy videos, but that really is the word to describe Ripto's rage. It's vibrant without being too in your face, while also understanding mood and lighting while not going overboard. I think this partly has to do with the fact that stages are no longer subservient to what the world gimmick was.
Thank you for helping us again, Spyro. You deserve another shiny thing. I was going to use it as a nightlight.
Beastmakers is the usual suspect in this comparison, as all its stages might as well have taken place in a bog, but I do think some of Dreamweaver's levels could be construed as generic fantasy, which, at its worst, Ripto's rage kinda hits with the hub worlds. No offense, Summer Forest, Autumn Plains, and Winter Tundra, you still look nice. But then you have something like Robotica Farms or Hurricos. One is a farm overrun by robotic insects, while the other is the stormy region filled to the brim with windmills and power relays. Each stage has a tight grip on its visual identity, even when there is crossover. I think because of these moments of intersection, there was effort put in to make sure the pairs could stand on their own. I'll mention it again later down the line, but clearly Sunny Beach and Aquaria Towers exist somewhere close together. However, where the towers is this brightly lit undersea city incorporated into a reef bed, Sunny Beach is this industrial dock owned by the water workers that plays on the name of the stage. Maybe there was a Sunny Beach here, but the water workers clearly bulldozed it over and started capturing any turtles they could. No two stages feel the same, and while I have qualms with the gameplay portion, this might be one of the best looking level sets ever made. It helps that Stewart Copeland's score is still the backbone to the adventure. While Spyro 1's OST is a banger, some of the tracks were derivative of others Copeland produced. Or maybe the other way around. Anyway, I still see the dancing lobsters anytime I visit Wizard's Peak. While some stages in Spyro 2 do share tracks, Fracture Hills and Idle Springs being two of the more notable duplicates, it avoids the pitfalls of Spyro 1's track list, making it winner by default. Anyway, have you heard Ripto's Rage's soundtrack?
Spyro.
Yeah, Copeland was on his game. Not only do you get a masterful dose of aural tone, as you can go from dark and moody to jaunty and jovial, just the genre Stewart hits and the samples used in this listing alone are wide. Hurricos begins with the quintessential Spyro drumline that a whole heap of songs from the series use, then starts plucking on an acoustic guitar like this is the old Snake theme from MGS4. How about the hustle and bustle of the Metropolis track mimicking how the city would have operated if there wasn't an Animal Farm uprising? The prominence of a surf guitar in Sunny Beach, the pan flutes in Cloud Temples, crafted to perfection. And just, you've seen the game in motion up to now, you tell me. Spyro still moves and animates in his usual way, but all the new enemies and characters look just as wonderful as our main guy. From the big details like how they interact with each other, I especially love that the gear grinders work on their robots, or how the Djinns throw magic blasts at the bandits, or with Spyro, I may hate the bee trees, but it is funny to see them get sad when they lose their hive, to how they idle around. The little ducklings in Sunny Beach just want to scuba, and that's adorable. The camels in Scorch will have their heads in the ground before they notice Spyro. And wrapped around all this is some pretty solid voice acting. Replacing Carlos Orazki is the legendary Tom Kenny, and he puts in a wonderful performance. Tom captures the attitude that Carlos gave Spyro, while adding his own softness to strike a nice balance between rambunctious younger dragon and hero of the realms. But even the supporting cast gets in on this. Greg Berger's duet of the dim-witted hunter and delightfully evil Ripto is fun all around. Melissa Disney's Alora has an excellent touch of sass to play off Spyro's thickness, while also being genuinely helpful and caring, and the unsung heroes of Milton James and Marcelo Tubert voice a countless amount of NPCs when the main cast weren't doing the role themselves. That's an underrated quality of Spyro 2's voice work, the amount of roles each actor played. While obviously a time-saving measure, it gives a coziness to interactions. While for some it is kinda obvious, Tom is just doing his SpongeBob voice for the electric trolls in Hurricos, others it's not as, apparent. The presentation of the game is outstanding. What more do you need me to say? Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, aka Gateway to Glimmer, aka Outrageous Tours, is a 3D collectathon smack dab in the middle of the second mascot boom. In fact, there is a lot of holdover from Spyro 1 to this title, to the point that if you want a general overview of how the basic mechanics work, watch that video. Spyro controls exactly how he does in the first game, sans a few missing moves and some newly added ones, and enemies are still broken down by whether you can charge or fry them. The difficulty is also equivalent, having a few troughs and peaks here and there. The joys of covering a sequel. As such, I'll mostly cover what is new since I don't want to be repeating myself more than I already do. As an extension of this, stages, for the most part, are still broken down as such. Hubs and levels. Hubs are still blocked off by item gates, there are no balloonists this time, thank the gods, facilitating the need to go into levels so you can progress further into the game, but this is the first major twist to the formula. You have to play every level in the first two hubs. Technically speaking, as I brought up Spyro's controls before structure, the removal of the dodge roll and inclusion of the hover, done by pressing triangle while gliding and giving you a bit of lift to reach ledges, should have been what I mentioned from the get-go, but apples to apples. What I mean by must play is demonstrated when you begin the game. Instead of getting dumped into a hub like the Artisan homeworld, you are placed into Glimmer, which is a stage. Gems, breakables, fodder still make their homes everywhere, though as you'll notice when you go through the level, enemies no longer drop gems upon defeat. They instead release their captive soul, there's an actual name for it, but visually it looks like their soul pops free, used to power up the stage's power-up gate. Fodder also has a rework as well. Sometimes instead of a normal butterfly, you'll get a dazzling one, which is a life/full heal package combo. These shiny insects are also found inside glass vases. Because mobs no longer give treasure, they are separately tracked from the pause menu, which still tells you how much stuff is in the stage. Gem count will stay the same throughout every level, best learn to love 400 gem minimum and maximum from this point forward, but replacing dragon eggs from Spyro 1 are orbs. Before opening that can of worms, the last object in the itinerary are talismans. See that pickaxe shape for Glimmer's pause screen? That's the talisman. Up until you get to the third and last hub, Winter Tundra, you will need all of them from a world to unlock its boss and move on to the next one. As there are only 3 hubs in Spyro 2, they being Summer Forest, Autumn Plains, and the aforementioned Winter Tundra, the technical lowest amount of stages you need to play to beat the game, not counting bosses, is 14. The 6 stages of Summer Forest and the 8 in Autumn Plains. That doesn't sound too bad. Why do I need gems and orbs then, I hear you ask yourself? Your walls are quite comfy, by the way. Besides for 100%, I'll get to that, enter stage left and right, Moneybags and the Professor. Both require one of the resources, gems for the former, orbs for the latter, to either unlock segments of a stage so that you can continue your journey, teach Spyro new abilities that he'll need, or to open up a level in a hub. More often than not, you'll only see the Professor in the hubs when he has a stage he can open up. Otherwise, he is an interactable NPC that will give orb challenges while on a level. Elora and Hunter take this role as well, when they aren't teaching you the basics or pointing you in the right direction, but they'll all ask for a certain amount of orbs. Moneybags, meanwhile, will always shake you down, whether in a hub or not, like he's coming from Yakuza 0. Like the bridge in Glimmer. This is what's preventing you from a bare minimum run, as collecting gems is self-explanatory. Orbs are obtained from what I will call orb challenges, orb tasks, side quests, whatever name you want to use. In essence, you help scratch someone's back, they give you an orb for your troubles. At least that is how most are framed. Sometimes orbs are free-floating in the ether waiting for you to grab them, other times you have to do a minigame. Looking at you, Speedway orbs. Yep, those have returned and are optional unless you want completion, these stages offering 400 gems for beating the track, and an orb for doing the hidden challenge. There is a bit of interplay between gems and orbs, and this is what makes Glimmer a good stage to use as an example. One of the orbs is blocked off by a ladder that Spyro can't climb. He'll need to return back to Glimmer once he has bought climbing from Moneybags later down the road. This isn't the only skill acquired from the bear. Spyro also learns how to swim underwater and horn bash. Yeah, regular water no longer hurts the purple dragon, though as a consequence he moves slower when underwater, facilitating the need to charge swim by holding square, and he can't breathe fire to deal with threats. The horn bash, meanwhile, used by jumping and hitting triangle twice, does a ground pound that can hurt certain enemies as well as open up a few set breakables. Like climbing, swimming, and the horn bash are used in some orb challenges, so if you know a level needs one of these abilities, it's best to just grab the talisman and save collecting everything for a return. That is, unless you are in Winter Tundra, as none of the stages there have talismans. They only offer orbs. Besides being used to unlock level portals, orbs are needed to get into the post-game resort Dragon Shores. There's not much to say about it, it's a few mini-games, but having everything does gift Spyro permanent Super Flame. And this isn't like the one provided to him by a fairy's kiss. Spyro 2 Super Flame is an aimable projectile that kills or breaks anything it hits unless it's a boss. It'll do 1 point of damage instead. What's funny about this is that if you have a completed save file, when you start a new game, you will have Super Flame unlocked from the get-go. You can turn it off in the options. This is how Spyro 2 handles New Game Plus. Last on the docket, bosses are a bit more involved as they typically have a gimmick. Crush transitions between colored circles to change up his attacks, Gulp's arena gets filled up with objects that both he and you can use to hurt each other, and Ripto has something similar but with orbs until you get to his second phase where you have Super Flight and Flame and need to shoot him down. Other than that, you wait until the boss is vulnerable or when you have the means to damage one. That's what makes permanent Super Flame fun. Honestly, my favorite aspect of Spyro 2, besides the revamped gameplay additions, as the hover is a fantastic inclusion in the Purple Dragon's moveset that felt sorely missing in the original game, is how diversified the level sets are. This is mostly a knock at how Spyro 1 tended to have the world theme blend into its stages for the most part, which I will admit brings its own positives in the shape of thematic synergy. All the wizard or beast stages align with the hub, while here Insomniac wanted the levels themselves to be the stars. Is it at the cost of the hubs? Kinda. They're mostly empty, sans gems and collectibles, and have somewhat generic season and fantasy iconography, but the trade-off, at least how I see it, is that each stage is memorable even if one is quite simple in construction. Some of that does come down to what I said in story. While there isn't an overlapping idea running through every level in a world, there are some intersections that elaborate where the stages are in a geographical sense. By separating the hubs and stages in this manner, you aren't boxed in by a theme while also being able to connect the dots between locations. Effectively, you avoid going off-brand like how the previous title sometimes did. You get some odd inclusions in Spyro 1. The Artisan homeworld was a staging grounds for Dark Hollow and Stone Hills, which both seemed like a different part of the main area, thus they related the closest to the Artisan identity. But then you have Town Square and Toasty, which felt like ill fits visually speaking. Town Square practically is Cliff Town Light, better belonging with the Peacekeepers, while Toasty's hallmarks align closer with the Dreamweavers. You see this also with the Peacekeepers world and Ice Caverns, which should have been put with the Magic Crafters. None of these stages are bad, mind you, and you might think this criticism doesn't hold any water, but I was never questioning a stage's inclusion in any of Spyro 2's hubs since there isn't an overarching idea apparent like there was for the Dragon Home worlds. So this is a best of both worlds scenario where you have dynamic theming, but also the levels can be their own entity. Case to hang this point on, Colossus and Idle Springs, the first two proper levels in Ripto's Rage. Sorry, Glimmer, even if I like your gym aesthetic and all the mice that remind me of Jerry. Oh, and the goofy lizards who are the weakest enemy in the game since they don't have an attack, even though you can sometimes see them swinging their picks at the gym cutters. On the surface, Colossus and Idle Springs couldn't be farther from each other. One centers on a band of monks dealing with a Yeti problem, as well as their livestock used to feed said Yeti breaking out of their stables and running amok, while the other has a group of woodcarvers being locked out of their temples and having their food stolen by the idols they created. Both are wildly different when it comes to the problem Spyro has to solve, and that's not even getting into the opening or closing cutscenes each level has that helps to paint the picture. It's equally as funny watching one of the goats to be sacrificed to the Yeti instead knock a monk into his place, as it is heartwarming to see one of the villainous idols reveal that he just wants to hang around the campfire and cook weenies and marshmallows with the woodcarvers. There's little dabbles of personality here, there, and everywhere for characters that exist either to be exposition or collectible dispensers, or to be a hazard for Spyro to deal with. And that extends to the environments. Where Colossus takes place somewhere up in the mountains with an almost Tibetan vibe, allowing you to theorize on what the monks' lives are like, Idle Springs' mixture of deep jungle roots and bodies of water harkens to tropical regions of our world, potentially of Polynesian inspiration or directly Hawaiian if we go off the hula girls and the fact that they have to deal with a personified tiki drink glass. Umbrella and all. I only caught that detail in this recent return. There's a straw or two you could probably grasp here, but as you look closer, these two levels that seem entirely separate have imagery or elements that line up with each other. I think the obvious piece of this is that the monks and the woodcutters are the same NPC. The only difference is that one side wears robes and is yellow, while the other is green and has overalls and other carpenter gear. Okay, so is this the same plane of existence? Or are the locations closer to each other than we thought? Or maybe perhaps the monks and woodcarvers are subdivisions of the same group? Then you look at the surroundings and you notice how both their temples incorporate a lot of giant heads or faces into their design. It's more obvious in Idle Springs what with the Moai heads, but Colossus's main gate is shaped into an idol that wouldn't be out of place in the springs. And while a majority of Colossus's orb tasks center around hockey, which I have to applaud that a number of the orbs gotten by the player usually involve a divergence in gameplay, even if it isn't always the strongest due to controls or how the mechanics actually work. How many people got stumped by Agent Zero's stealth section or the Speedway secret objectives? The Professor-centered mission has you cleanse Colossus's idols from evil spirits. While the bronze statues in the mountains take the form of the monks, who's to say that the idols in the springs weren't brought to life by those self-same spirits? A number of stages, if I haven't mentioned, are paired like this yet still stand alone if you want to look at them isolated. And what's more, you typically do unique things in a level that no others share. Like with Aquaria Towers and Sunny Beach. Both are water-focused and have a shared continuity since the shady water workers populate both areas, but whereas in Beach you have to follow a group of baby turtles to the endpoint using the larger quadrupedal ones to activate gates and act as platforms, Towers has you raise the water level so you can access newer areas and continue exploring. That's another thing I should mention, the interweaving of the level gimmick into the story of a stage. You're not just submerging everything in water so you can continue on with Towers. These seahorses of Aquaria have been left high and dry and need their home restored. Later on in Crystal Glacier, a bunch of frost wizards have captured the shaman of a tribal group, and the only way to get him free is to protect the tribesmen from the wizards so they can open the path up for you. If you unfreeze a tribesman while a wizard is still alive, the frosty bastard will fling a snowball at the tribesman and refreeze them. Cloud Temples has you do battle with a bunch of thieving warlocks so that the congregating wizards can undo the damage to their home. There's a lot more going on in RR stages compared to other mascot platformer collectathons of the era, especially when compared to its predecessor. While your main objective is still to reach the end of a level and grab everything while you're doing that, the inclusion of these kinds of ideas make it seem more than that. You're not just mindlessly going Captain Klepto because that's the name of the game and the barriers to see more of the journey are what's in your pockets. I think that's why I'm not as annoyed by Moneybags as others. He's clearly in the role of a mild antagonist, so his shakedowns are supposed to be these small inconveniences. Unlike the balloonists who were aligned with the dragons, yet felt like obligatory stopgaps to make sure that you were playing the game. A matter of perspective and framing. It's almost evolutionary, perhaps revolutionary, going from simple collectathons like Mario 64 or Crash 1, which had a thin excuse for a plot, to this that dabbled a lot more, including narrative elements with its gameplay, to something like Sly 2, Band of Thieves, having stakes, tension, character growth. You know, a story you can dissect and examine. It's why I have a hard time listing out what my favorite levels are for Spyro 2, as all tend to do something unique or have some form of payoff, like how in Mystic Marsh the whole reason why the animals grew restless was because a monk left an orb in a fountain, or how the satyrs of Magma Cone help you drive back the Earth Shapers by setting up designated co-op attack points. Hurricos might have my favorite enemy-to-enemy relationship with the Gear Grinders and their robots, since one needs the other to move. Meanwhile, Skelos Badlands has two of my favorite enemies in general, the Cat Bats and Fire Wizards. While the former gets a shared archetype with the Flying Robot Bees and Robotica Farms, I love that there is a different death animation for them based on whether you hit them with a rock or burn them, and the Fire Wizards have the most interesting gameplay interaction next to the Gun Guards in Scorch. When you charge a Fire Wizard, he's dead, but his head will be sent flying wherever it lands. It will explode there after a 3-second delay. That hits anything regardless of alignment. The Scorch Gun Guards, meanwhile, will engage in target practice, shooting at vases and fodder just for fun. But I've been dancing around the point for long enough. I said hard, not impossible. It's Zephyr and Breeze Harbor, literally designed with the mentality of anything you can do, I can do better. Are they paired worlds? Yes, with the caveat that both are at war with each other, so the main objective in the stages for Spyro involve helping the Ether, whether by powering up a Breeze Harbor war machine or by repelling the bird attack on Zephyr. No other paired stage has that relationship. It's always an antagonistic outside force, like the Earth Shapers, the Water Workers, or Elemental Wizards that's the problem. Not that two sides that are friendly with Spyro are at each other's throats. Do the stages have an interesting gimmick or mechanic they take advantage of? Yes, both involving their enemies. Breeze Harbor needs you to power up steam generators by lighting torches that the land blubbers will put out with their water. Kill them so that you can use the bird's technology. Also, the land blubbers, like the Gear Grinders, have some funny idle animations like the little ones in tubs spitting at the big firemen. Meanwhile, Zephyr has distinct enemy dynamics, particularly with the baby birds and the flying bombers. The bombers will restock the babies with projectiles, allowing them to shoot Spyro from a faraway distance, making them a notable threat. However, if the babies are gone, the bombers will drop their payload directly onto the dragon if he's close by. And it's not like the babies are defenseless without a bomber to restock them. Both stages share the cannon as a usable object to solve puzzles, with Harbor having it connected to an orb task, and a number of the orbs in the stages involve a distinctive style of gameplay separate from the norm. Harbor has its trolley minigame, which I actually like. It's a fast game of memory, not too dissimilar from the speedways, while Zephyr has the calyx you need to wrangle, as well as the seed climb that would be later elaborated on in one of Year of the Dragon's best levels, Charmed Ridge. Everything that is great and wonderful about Spyro 2's levels are showcased in both Zephyr and Breeze Harbor. They might be two of the best stages in the entire original Spyro trilogy, but it's in the level set that introduces both where the worst stage of the game is also in, a stage that suffers heavily from a structural problem the game has, among other issues. One word, 12 letters, meaning to revisit an area you've already been to. What is backtracking? Whoever answered that wins Final Jeopardy. My major complaint with Spyro 2, and one of the biggest reasons why I didn't immediately jump to it after 1 for LTA, is the mandatory backtracking the game forces you to partake in for 100%. If I may indulge a bit of background, I was contemplating not doing 100% for this run. Yeah, it's that annoying because of how the abilities are drip-fed to you and how much you actually have to get done before you can acquire them. There are 5, or 6 depending on your play order, infamous levels in Ripto's Rage, some bearing far greater infamy than others, synonymous with completing this title and earning the permanent Super Flame. Glimmer, Summer Forest, Idle Springs with an Asterisk, Sunny Beach, Shady Oasis, and fucking Fracture Hills. While I've already given up the ghost on which one is the worst with that comment, what turns some of these stages from fun little romps to the height of busy work is that there's no getting around the fact that for all the stages I listed, discluding Summer Forest since it's a hub, and if you slot Idle Springs after Colossus, you'll have to play each a minimum of twice. That means if you even try to play a stage normally, or gods forbid you don't know that you can't get everything in one go, you'll be punished on the repeat because you'll have to reinvest into killing every enemy in case you need the level's power up, and if you've collected some of the gems but not all, good luck remembering where you've been and where you haven't. That second part is already a problem you'll have to deal with since each stage comes packed to the gills with 400 gems, no more, no less, and with mobs not carrying gems on their corpses, that means they're all out in the field either free floating in the ether or in containers. It is relatively easy to overlook gems in Spyro 2, owing to level density and size plus item placement, and that's with stages like Hurricane, Zephyr, and Robotica Farms, levels that are one-shot. You aren't collecting half the treasures, stopping and playing about 3 to 4 other stages, then a boss, then coming back after getting the ability you needed. Because for the Fearsome 5, or Sadistic 6, and I'll get into that, that's what you have to do. At least with Glimmer, Summer Forest, Sunny Beach, and Shady Oasis, the pain of those stages is knowing that you can't grab everything your first time through, and will have to wait until later to do so. Why I'm wishy-washy with Idle Springs is that you need swimming for it, meaning just do Colossus first and grab all the gems to buy the skill for money bags. Sucks if you don't know that, as with the others, but at least the solution isn't a hub away. And that's your answer. You need all the talismans in a world to get to the next one if you aren't in Winter Tundra, so for the 4 and Summer Forest, speedrun them and save your time for the run back. Don't grab any gems unless necessary, don't do any orb tasks, get them over with as quick as possible so you know where everything is and won't have to worry about second guessing yourself. Thankfully, none of them force you to play an annoying minigame twice because you didn't know that the Horn Bash was necessary for part 2, and thus not only have wasted your time in the present, but the future as you can't skip part 1. What's that? Fracture Hills is the worst stage in Ripto's Rage because of a trap you can only foresee if you've played the game before or know about it? Nah! Anyway, fuck Fracture Hills on a multitude of levels, this being one of them. Ask anyone who has played the original trilogy of Spyro games what the worst segments are from each. Spyro the Dragon has treetops and the advent of supercharging being a bothersome and floating mechanic to control, or if I may recall my video, to me it was Misty Bog and the focus on combat with those damn frogs. The Year of the Dragon has a few to choose from, whether Sergeant Bird's Gallery in Charmed Ridge, Lost Fleet's skateboarding area, Fireworks Factory's Dual Dragon / Agent 9 FPS, or a spooky Swamp Sheila escort segment, which that last one learned from Ripto's Rage because not only is one of the orbs from Fracture Hills an escorting task, it is one rotten layer cake. Before continuing, as I need to address this for my own sanity, yeah, I don't like the enemies in Fracture Hills. Another reason why I don't go back to Ripto's Rage as often. It's a singularity of enemies I have negative emotions attached to. The killer bushes are back, terrifying little me into right now, but those bee trees and earth shapers are worth shaking a stick at as well. At least with the bushes, they're toned down versions of the ones from Spyro the Dragon. They don't lunge as fast nor jump scare as hard. You see them from a mile away and they don't have that unnerving rustling the ones in 1 did. so you'll torch them before they get a chance to munch. The bee trees and earth shapers, a case of the frogs. As soon as a bee tree becomes active, they'll attack with their hive, which travels faster than any other move in Gateway to Glimmer and has a pretty sizable tracking range around the tree. Unless you are pinpoint, they'll score a wounding blow before you can. You can see how I handle them with kitty gloves in my footage. And well, they have that googly eye look that I went into a rant about in Spyro 1's Bad Tab. The lizard part of my brain doesn't like it, as if staring at the uncanny valley. Same with the robo-sharks from Aquaria Towers, though as soon as they spot Spyro and go to chomp him, they'll chase the dragon to the ends of the earth in a pseudo-green devil fashion. Also, on a base level, I fundamentally don't like being attacked in the water. Really gets my flight or flight going, for whatever it's worth. That's why I hate the puffer platypi in Mystic Marsh, even if they are extremely passive. Submerged in water plus something trying to kill me equals nope. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. No. No. Back to Fracture Hills, while the Earth Shapers don't inflict arcane damage to my amygdala, they too have a pretty sizable attack radius with their pickaxes. Length as opposed to width this time, as they'll pancake you before you can charge them into any lava pools. The big ESs and magma cones share this attribute, but the best way to deal with both is to get them to preemptively swing so you can whiff punish with a charge. That wherein lies the problem. The Alchemist Escort task effectively wants you to guess the pathing of the eponymous character as you protect them against Earth Shapers. While it is a set path, unless you commit it to memory, you won't really have a clue on where he goes on the journey for your first few attempts, and run the risk of either taking excessive damage from the Earth Shapers, or by having to restart from the beginning because the satyr's movement doesn't make a load of sense and you guessed wrong when he decided to faff about. The Alchemist double backs, loop-de-loops, and does everything he can to make following him aggravating for both you and the camera. If you lose sight of him, chances are in the next second he'll get picked. And the cherry on top of this, without having the Horn Bash to do the hunter half of this task, the part 2 I've been referencing, which suffers from the pathing problem like part 1 does, as where Hunter decides to take the shot at the Earth Shapers you have to bash doesn't make any logical sense, on top of the Horn Bash window being short and the hitbox for it being finicky with failure starting you back at the beginning of part 2, you have to help the Alchemist again on a revisit. There's the salt I ordered for this wound. Unlike all the rest of the stages I've mentioned that have clear-cut, no you can't do this right now prompts, like there being a ladder, a pool of water you can't dive into, or even a character saying come back later, nothing is stopping you from stepping on the rake that is the Alchemist orbs. Never mind the enemies and the pain they've given to me. The supercharged orb that suffers from the usual problems the mechanic has, how microcosmic this whole stage is of Spyro 1's headlining collectible, effectively making it creatively threadbare, or even Fracture Hills' bizarre openness that makes it seem like a developer's first level, or 2 levels haphazardly put together. Earth Shapers are the major threat, but then tree? And bush? What are these thematics? And why are they separate from the other? What kills FH to me is how self-centered the Alchemist orbs are as a task. Legitimately, it is the only thing that sticks out about the stage because of how bad it is. It subsumes the whole entire identity, something that none of the other bad tasks do. Like, sure, Hunter's minigames in the speedways can be fumbly-bumbly either through their loose controls or how you don't have enough of a time window to react to what is coming up, and the sentence, "trouble with the trolley, eh?" is probably someone's Unatco kill phrase despite my liking of it, but none of them are as much as a black hole like the Alchemist is. The speedways are still frenetic tests of memorization when you aren't saddled with the cheetah, and Breeze Harbor still has the interplay between its enemies and the stage gimmick. There is something good to offset the bad. What does Fracture Hills have? Even the weaker levels of Spyro 2, like Scorch, which is a personal favorite of mine, they're still excellent theming punching above its weight. Scorch feels like a base you're infiltrating, the guards and their steeds trying to stop you. The gun guards are clearly bored and goofing off of their target practice. Fracture Hills doesn't have that. The only thing that really hints at there being a war between the satyrs and fauns against the Earthshapers is that the satyrs are trapped in stone and need to be freed to break out their temple. What you end up mostly fighting are unrelated bushes and trees that could very well be flora, fauna, caught up in the scuffle. None of the enemy groups interact with each other or even the host of the world. One side is all Earthshapers who don't directly interact with the fauns and satyrs like how they're shown in FH's opening cutscene, like how the Frost Wizards or Landblubbers do. The other trees and bushes that only interact with Spyro. Again, compare this to Magma Cone, who only have the Earthshapers as threats, that those specific satyrs are helping you to fight, or even Aquaria Towers, where the water workers are terrorizing both the allied seahorses as well as the hostile crabs. It's the little things that which call attention to the big picture. It's ironic that the main characters you interact with in Fracture Hills are stereotypical Scottish satyrs and blasé Valley Girl fauns. Caricatures befitting a caricature. Fracture Hills just doesn't seem like a complete level with disparate elements all over the dang place. It's the only level that feels like this in Ripto's Rage, seeming more in line with Spyro 1's design ethos when this game has grown past that. And let me just say this to cap off, every stage did not need 400 gems. Just sends the pacing right into a meat shredder. There was nothing wrong with the smaller gem amounts to help ease the player into the bigger levels, or to create a natural size cap for what a stage can have, but because all stages now have 400, every one of them feels larger than they needed to be, and the glint off in the draw distance only helps so much with how a number tend to be intricate. If I'm already running up against the wall of, crap, am I missing 2 or 5 or 10 in the first standard level of the game, that is an ill omen. Like I said, I have hangups with Spyro 2. It nails down being bigger and badder, retaining a lot of what made the first Spyro great, such as the uniqueness of the worlds from what you do in them to who you fight, while expanding upon the Purple Dragon's moveset, allowing for new avenues of exploration and gameplay, but the cost was making levels feel too big at times, hurting the pace, and having mandatory backtracking in the worst way possible. 5, count 'em 5 levels can't be completed the first go-around. You need climbing for Glimmer, Sunny Beach, and Summer Forest, which means defeating Crush, and the Horn Bash for Shady Oasis and Fracture Hills, which means defeating Gulp. And with no fast travel to jump between levels or hubs, you have to return to whichever home world from their portal, also you can head back and jump into the stage that you couldn't complete when you grabbed the talisman. That aggravates me to no end. It's why I still have a preference for Spyro 1, even though it lacks 2's quality of life improvements. It's funny how Spyro 2 and Ratchet 2, for me at least, are diametric opposites. Again, I don't hate Ripto's Rage, it's still one of the best mascot collectathon platformers I've played, and I have an attachment to it alongside the other 2 titles in the original trilogy as being some of the very first video games I've played. It just does a few things that annoy me to the point of aggravation. Meanwhile, going commando absolutely mollywops Ratchet and Clank 1, no contest. Turning the awkward platformer with some action into a third-person shooter was the best decision Insomniac ever made, giving us Up Your Arsenal and the crowning jewel of Deadlocked. and also some of the future games, particularly Tools and Crack. Like, to give some insight into my brain, I think Ratchet & Clank's Quadrilogy and Sly Cooper's Trilogy on the PlayStation 2, barring both first entries, are the greatest mascot games of all time. No others can ever reach the heights of Commando, Arsenal Deadlocked, or Band of and Honor Among Thieves. Insomniac and Sucker Punch were simply cooking on a whole different level. Which is a shame, isn't it? No, I'm not annoyed by how the future series panned out after Crack. I love weird ventures into 4-player platformers and tower defense strategy. And Thieves in Time totally doesn't ruin all the good that Honor left Sly Cooper off with. Nope. I'm not mad. I'm not. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder, or don't. I ain't your Uncle Erwin. And as always, this showing of Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage is over, but stay tuned for our next and final feature of the year. Another sequel that I've been meaning to get to for a third generation mascot character. Sly 2 Band of Thieves.